next couple of minutes. My name is Deanna Gerber, and I'm the recruitment coordinator here at the College of Veterinary Medicine. Thank you so much for joining us for this financial aid webinar. I'm really excited to hear from Joyce from our financial aid office all about tuition. We'll talk about scholarships, student loans, all of that kind of good stuff. I do have some kind of housekeeping announcements here, and we'll do introductions, kind of formal introductions after that as well. So while folks are still kind of rolling in here, I do want to let you all know that our financial aid webinar is being recorded, and that will be put on our YouTube channel. So that YouTube channel is, if you do youtube.com/Iowa State University College of Veterinary Medicine, you'll be able to find that. Please look for that closer to Friday, probably, before that gets kind of edited and uploaded there. But if you miss anything or the call drops out, you're more than welcome to pick it up there and rewatch. It is a webinar, so if you're unfamiliar with Zoom webinars, I think most of us are familiar with that by now, but if you're unfamiliar, your video and microphone are both off, so you don't have to worry about that. And then the biggest part of tonight is going to be, obviously financial aid information, but also we want to be able to answer the questions that you might have. So you will see at the bottom of your screen a Q&A box or a Q&A, button. If you open that up, it'll bring up the box. So the way that those are going to work is everyone can see the questions in the Q&A box. You're allowed to upvote a question. So if you want to peruse that, as questions roll in, if there's a question you really want to know the answer to, please upvote it. That kind of helps us, kind of keep all of the questions kind of organized, since there are so many of us on the call this afternoon or this evening. So go ahead and upvote the questions that you're interested in, or if someone has a similar question. If there is something that you have a question to that, is maybe unique to your situation, or might be something that, only a handful of folks, it really pertains to just a handful of folks. We do have our coordinator of admissions, Kathy Keel, as well as one of our students, Caitlin, here to kind of answer those questions as well. So the middle tab that you should see in that Q&A box will say answered. So Caitlin and Kathy will both go through questions, and if they want to type an answer to a question, it'll appear in that answered tab. So that's kind of how the Q&A box rolls. So you don't have to worry about being in the chat box too much. However, one of the things that I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste the link to register for our next webinar, which is specifically a student panel. So what's cool about that is that if you came tonight with questions about student life, about even like jobs on campus or anything like that, how students made their decision to come to Iowa State, what programs they really appreciate, and all of that, that is going to happen on February 16th. So the chat in the chat box, you should see a link to register for that webinar. So that's at 6 p.m. on February 16th. So tonight we really want to focus our questions on, things pertaining to financial aid, student loans, tuition, scholarships, and all of that. So I appreciate your help on that. Just a few more housekeeping things. Reminder that if you have not already sent in your updates for the, the courses that you took this fall and possibly this summer as well, those they need to be official from the school. Those transcripts are due January 20th. And if you have questions about that, you can go to our apply page, which I will link in just a few minutes. Also remember to communicate anything that you need from the admissions team, or anything that you have to for the admissions team on the message board. That's via your supplemental application. So things like, If your transcript is being sent in, but it's a different name than you used on Vimcast, Kathy and I were talking about a situation like that today. That's totally fine. Let the admissions team know about that so that they can match your Vimcast application and your supplemental application with your transcript. So things like that, definitely let us know about on the message board. Financial aid, or before we get to that, decisions will go out by the end or close to the end of the day on February 15th. So if you have like a countdown calendar or, an app on your phone that's counting down, if you check your message board at midnight on, 12:01 a.m. on February 15th, there won't be anything there. Get up, have, your coffee, tea, whatever, go to class, go to work, do what you need to do. And then towards the end of the day, go ahead and check that message board and your status page there. And then a reminder to fill out your FAFSA. We'll talk more about that later as well. But to, think about things like getting that financial aid and getting scholarships, FAFSA is very important. Please fill that out as soon as possible. And I think that's a good segue to our webinar our webinar tonight. So again, my name's Deanna. If you have specific questions that you'd like to ask, you're welcome to send me a direct message if there's a bit of information that you missed. But remember that most of our Q&As will be in that Q&A box and upvote those questions as they start rolling in. So without further ado, I want to introduce Tara Joyce, who works in our financial aid office and specifically with our veterinary students. So Tara, I'm going to let you do more of the intro. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and you can take it away.
All right. Hi, everyone. As Deanna said, my name is Tara. I am a financial aid advisor at Iowa State University, and I do work with students who are pursuing a degree in the College of Vet Med. And I also work with our undergraduate students. And so I'm familiar with your experience as you're wrapping up or have wrapped up a degree and then are entering into a professional program. So with tonight's presentation, I'm going to be talking about what to expect with your first year in terms of how to pay for vet school as well as costs to expect. Now, as Deanna mentioned, that chat is open throughout the presentation tonight, and thankfully we have great moderators with us. Caitlin is a student, and so she's living the experience, is affording to be here, and will be a great asset to answer questions for you. I know questions may come up specifically about costs associated with being a student, and I'll address some of those. And then the student panel in February will be a great opportunity to have some of those questions answered more in depth. And then Kathy is on board from admissions to answer those scholarship questions. And then Deanna will also be helping to moderate the chat. And so they'll be interrupting me as needed to answer any commonly asked questions. And if not, we'll also answer questions at the end. So you'll have lots of opportunities here. So I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully this works. Need to. All right, is the Zoom thing in the way? Let me move you guys. All right.
You're good. I can see the whole screen.
Okay, just want to make sure. Thank you, Deanna. All right. So if you do have questions after this session tonight, you are welcome to send me an email. I've provided my email address on the screen. So VM, so like vet med, financial aid at iastate.edu. And I know that some of you have already applied for financial aid at Iowa State, and you may have gotten emails from our office already, just confirming that we have your FAFSA form. And so you can always just contact the main office of student financial aid as well. That's where I work, that's where I'm housed. And so you can get a hold of me there too. But this email address is specific to get a hold of me. So we're going to jump into the big numbers here. We're going to talk about the cost to attend. And so we're going to break this down as our current year students, our current first year students. This is what they have for their cost. So we break costs down between resident and non-resident students. And so I know a lot of you are joining us from Iowa. We also have non-resident students joining us tonight as well. And for tuition purposes, we consider a resident student a student who resides in the state of Iowa as their state of residency. Now, I'll talk about at the end, if you're a non-resident student and you're curious, how do I get residency? I'll address that towards the end of the session tonight. Non-resident students are students who reside outside of the state of Iowa and are joining us within the domestic United States. Tuition and fees are finalized by a board of regents that's appointed by the governor of Iowa by June every year. So we at Iowa State University do not actually set your tuition and fees. It's finalized by a board of regents. The cost we're looking at are for this current academic year for a fall semester and a spring semester. And I know some of you may be joining us from a quarter system or a trimester system or the traditional fall and spring semester system. And this is based on a fall semester and a spring semester. So half of the cost that you see for tuition and fees is assessed in the fall. The other half is assessed in the spring. The fees assessed are mandatory for all students, and so these are not optional. You may see that some of your classes, maybe those with labs, may have another fee assessed, but for most students, the amount we're seeing for resident students of $25,498 is the tuition and mandatory fee rate for the year, and the non-resident students closer to $55,000 for the year. Now, first-year students will also be assessed a one-time charge to purchase an Iowa State University laptop. This is required for your program. You can have your own personal laptop, and that's fine, but you have a required laptop purchase that will be on your fall semester university bill, and you will be using this laptop extensively while you are enrolled in the College of Veterinary Medicine. The student panel will be able to answer more questions specifically about what makes this laptop special. And then it's only assessed once. And so it's a one-time fee on your U-bill. There is information technology staff housed in the College of Veterinary Medicine to quickly and easily answer any questions that you may have about the laptop if you run into any issues with it. But just know this is a one-time charge you will see in the fall semester. We assume that tuition and the laptop and mandatory fees are your billable expenses for the year. So for students from Iowa, we expect your billable costs that you will pay to Iowa State University to be a little over $28,000. Our non-resident students will have a bill closer to $57,000. Now, like I said, tuition and fees is finalized in June every year. So this could change for the upcoming school year. In the event tuition and fee changes by a vote by the Board of Regents, it will be updated on the Iowa State University website. Out-of-pocket costs are also built into your cost of attendance. And so in your undergraduate years, you would think of these as like your housing costs to live on campus or off campus, your cost to eat, your cost to do daily things like drive your car or do laundry or pay medical bills, that kind of stuff. So at Iowa State University, we assume that you will still incur these expenses. We build financial aid into all costs of attendance for all students to include housing and meals, regardless if you live on campus or off campus, books, and also just random out-of-pocket expenses you may incur. Now for housing and meals, this does not require you to live on campus. In fact, most of our students who are attending the College of Vet Med are living off campus. So they have their own apartment or home, and financial aid helps them cover their rent because they still can use financial aid to cover costs that are not on their U-bill, like their apartment or their rent elsewhere or a house. Some students may elect to purchase a meal plan at Iowa State, but many students are bringing their lunch every day or may just buy food here and there at a more convenience grab and go option. And so a lot of students may not be utilizing the traditional meal plan you had in your undergrad years, but we still know you have to pay to eat somewhere, which is why we build it into your cost of attendance. Book costs, you all know from being students, will vary a little bit semester to semester, but on average, students spend about $1,000 a year on books and supplies. Now, again, this can vary a little bit, but we assume that's an average, not a fixed amount. And then all other out-of-pocket expenses you may incur are for things like medical bills, travel expenses to and from home. Thankfully, if you're living in Ames, your commute will be very short to the college itself for classes, and so you won't have much on-the-ground transportation expenses in the city of Ames, but we know their costs may come up, and so we factor those into your cost of attendance. What this means is, for instance, if you are a student from the state of Iowa, your cost of attendance lets us know how much financial aid you can receive. So for this year, a resident student received almost $42,000 in financial aid, but their billable amount, what they actually pay Iowa State, was only $28,000. So that means that difference of almost $6,000 a semester is what you could use to live on to cover your out-of-pocket expenses if you need it. Non-resident students, that difference is the same, just that billable cost is higher. Not all students are using financial aid to cover their out-of-pocket expenses, but a lot of students are. And the student panel in February can help to answer questions about budgeting, cost to live in Ames. Caitlin is also a great resource to answer some of those common questions that you have, as well as your message board that you have as part of your admissions account. You may see some questions come up on there, or you can ask questions on there as well. But students are living comfortably in Ames while they're pursuing their degree, and there are a variety of housing options available on campus and off campus.
Can I jump in with a couple of questions?
Yeah.
Perfect. So one question I have from a student is it possible after the first year of vet school to apply for in-state tuition?
Yes, I'll be covering that here shortly. The answer is no. The tuition you start with is the tuition you are assessed. So the path to residency in the state of Iowa is for students who are already employed full-time in the state of Iowa, or for students who are military affiliated. And so no, unfortunately, attending for a year will not establish residency for tuition purposes.
Perfect, thank you. And then the another question I have is about international student costs. Are those the same as non-resident?
International student costs are different, so I'm glad you brought that up. So they're very similar to the non-resident tuition and fees. They are a little bit higher, and I'm sorry I did not include them on the slide, but they are published on the Iowa State University website, but very similar to the non-resident tuition and fees. All other costs are the same, but the tuition and fees are a little bit higher for international students.
Great. I've got one more question, which is if you are a military dependent, can you get in-state tuition?
I'll be covering that at the end. I'll be providing information for the registrar's office. They determine residency. So it is coming. So I know it's always a tough question. Yeah, for non-resident students is how do I make this cheaper?
Yes.
We'll cover it. It's coming.
Awesome. Perfect. Okay. Sounds good. That's all I've got for now. So
okay, sounds good. Interrupt again if any other questions come up.
Perfect. Thanks, Tara.
Yes. So next we're going to move into how to pay for these costs. Regardless of what state you're from, it costs a lot of money to go to professional school, but there are financial aid options to help make this affordable. So my job in financial aid is to help students with the federal aid options, like those options from the FAFSA. Kathy in admissions works with the scholarships. So myself in financial aid, I don't determine scholarships. In fact, I don't know who's selected for scholarships. Eventually I see them on a list, but I am in no part making those decisions. The FAFSA itself is not a scholarship application. Your application for admission was used for your scholarship application as well. And in future years, there's a separate scholarship application. And you know, some scholarships may require a student to demonstrate high financial need from filing the FAFSA, but others don't. And so filing the FAFSA is one way to secure federal financial aid, but scholarships work differently. The FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid, and all schools have a different deadline. Now, if you were an undergraduate student and used financial aid, you may have found that your school had a really early deadline to file the FAFSA every year. At Iowa State, for veterinary medicine students, we use a deadline of March 1st to file the FAFSA for the upcoming school year, which means you haven't missed that deadline. Now I'm going to talk about the different loan options from FAFSA, but there is one loan called a health profession student loan that requires the FAFSA to be filed with parent information by March 1st. You can file the FAFSA without parent information and still receive financial aid options as well. I'll be talking more about the health profession student loan here shortly, the advantages of it, and why parent information is required because you are otherwise at this point an independent student. Now, if you will not apply for the health profession student loan, you can file the FAFSA anytime, even after March 1st, and you can file without parent information. I recommend making sure the FAFSA is done no later than the summer, though, if you're not applying for the health profession student loan, because I want you to have as much time as possible to plan to pay for your education and not be scrambling at the last minute trying to put the pieces together. Once we have your FAFSA, and we have the offers of admission, financial aid offers will then be created and are typically mailed to you mid-May. Now you may hear about scholarships sooner than that, or you may hear about scholarships closer to May. May is when the federal loan offers go out. So just know that financial aid offer I'm creating in May will be your loan options. Scholarships, like I said, are separate, but they will be listed on your financial aid offer with your loan options if you are offered a scholarship at that time. All financial aid steps are completed online in a portal called Access Plus. Right now, you don't need to worry about Access Plus, but just know you will have a secure login for it to accept your financial aid. Now, one common question I get about filing the FAFSA, especially from those of you who have already filed it, and if that's the case, terrific. You can add parent information to your FAFSA if you filed the FAFSA initially without it. So yes, you can go in and update your FAFSA to add your parents' information to be considered for the health profession student loan, and you have until March 1st to do that. You may have also received an email from the Office of Student Financial Aid saying that your FAFSA was received, but we couldn't match it up with your application for admission. Don't worry about it. We take care of that once we can see your offered admission to the College of Veterinary Medicine. So just know that email acknowledges we have your FAFSA on file. And then if you are offered admission, we'll get everything matched up so you can receive a financial aid offer. So I'm going to talk more about the loan options available to students who provide parent information on the FAFSA and those who don't provide parent information, because there's options for all students. If you are offered loans, you always have the option to reduce, decline, and accept loans anytime during the semester. So just know, well, I know you're going to want scholarship money if you're offered it. Not all students want to use all the loans offered to them or any loans offered to them. So you are not required to accept them, and you can always reduce or decline them. Loans are repaid after you graduate, or if you stop attending, repaid after you stop attending. If you borrowed loans in your undergraduate years or a prior degree, they will be deferred upon entry into the College of Veterinary Medicine whenever classes start in August. So just know, if you are a prior loan borrower, you don't have to pay on those loans while you are enrolled, and enrollment officially starts the first day of class in August. And so just know those loans go into a deferment, no payment required status. The types of loans you can borrow as a veterinary medicine student include an unsubsidized loan, a PLUS loan, and a health profession student loan. Now, an unsubsidized loan is a loan from FAFSA that's very similar to loans that undergraduate students can use. It is a loan that accrues interest while you're in school. I'll show you what the interest is here on the next slide, and parent information is not required. The PLUS loan is a supplemental unsubsidized loan that some students may use, especially our non-resident students may use, to help cover their remaining out-of-pocket expenses, and sometimes expenses on their U-bill. Parent information is not required to be considered for the PLUS loan. The FAFSA can be filed any time of the year for consideration for the unsubsidized loan or the PLUS loan. The health profession student loan, though, otherwise known as HPSL for health profession student loan, is a need-based loan, and it does require parent information. The health profession student loan was established in the early 1990s by the Department of Health and Human Services. The Department of Health and Human Services requires that students provide parent information on the FAFSA, as the Department of Health and Human Services feels that parent information is a good measure of a student's unmet financial need. Regrettably, this has not changed since about 1992. So I understand that many of you are otherwise independent due to age, marriage, you have children, or you're just not in a financially bound relationship with your parents any longer. You do still have to provide parent information to determine if there's unmet need to be considered for this health profession student loan. The advantage of using the health profession student loan is shown here on this next slide, and this chart's overwhelming, so I'm going to break it down. The health profession student loan is the last row on this slide, and it is a no interest loan. So yes, you have to pay it back, but it's no interest while you are in school, and it stays no interest a full year after you graduate. The downside, though, is you have to demonstrate unmet financial need, and you have to file the FAFSA with parent information. The two other types of loans, the unsubsidized loan and the PLUS loan, are available to any FAFSA filer, no parent information required. The unsubsidized loan amount for a professional student pursuing a degree in medicine is $40,500 for the year. If you are a student from Iowa, this will cover your full cost of attendance, or nearly cover your full cost of attendance. The interest will accrue at 4.3% upon disbursement to your university bill. Interest will continue to accumulate until the loan is paid in full. The PLUS loan is similar in that it is also accruing interest. This year, the interest rate's 5.3%, and interest will continue to accumulate until the loan is paid in full. The PLUS loan amount will vary by student depending on how much they want to borrow and cannot exceed the cost of attendance. So this is where we primarily have our non-resident students using the PLUS loan to cover their out-of-pocket expenses. The health profession student loan amount varies by student because every student has different amounts of unmet need. For this current year, the health profession student loan amount varied between about $1,500 up to about $9,000. So it's not a huge loan like the other two federal loans because it's a smaller funded loan program, but it can definitely still help to reduce your costs considering your other loan options will accrue interest throughout your time in veterinary school. You can always volunteer loan payments while you're in school to help keep your interest down, but repayment is not required until 6 months after you graduate. Health profession student loan repayment begins 1 year after you graduate. A typical loan repayment plan for a student graduating with a veterinary medicine degree is 20 to 25 years, but you can pay your loan debt off sooner than that. Students sometimes prefer the longer repayment plans to ensure they can live a quality of life that they want after they graduate and to reduce their burden on their other finances while they're repaying their veterinary loan debt. So just know you will have options available to you in terms of the types of loans, and it's up to you on what you borrow on an annual basis. The interest rates are also subject to change on an annual basis, and I didn't bring that up, but the interest rates we see are for this current year. Interest is determined by congressional action by July 1st every year, so it is possible the interest rate may change for your first year in veterinary school. Before I go on though, Deanna, are there any questions I can answer about loans or anything that's come up about the FAFSA?
Yeah, thank you. There are a few things. So one of the things that got asked about the HPSL loan is if your status, whether you're in state or out of state, affects that.
It does. That's a great question. Yes, so our non-resident students have more need because their cost is higher. And so yes, residency does affect that amount. If you're an in-state student, you have less financial need than a non-resident student. And so, yeah, but there's also cases where, let's say a resident student gets $4,000 and a non-resident student gets $4,000. And so non-resident students typically get a little bit more from it because their cost is higher, but it can vary.
Got it. Perfect. Thank you. So actually two more questions on the HPSL. So first, so because you need parent information, does that affect your eligibility for the other two loans, or is it do they just use that information?
Not at all. It's just used for the health profession student loan. So just know if you fill out the FAFSA and you provide that parent information and you end up not qualifying for health profession student loan or decide not to use it, you're still considered for the other two loans, no questions asked. Those are automatically available as long as there's room in your cost of attendance. So no issues there at all.
Perfect. And then the last question on the HPSL is as far as because they need parent information, does it affect the parents at all? Do they have to co-sign or anything like that?
That is such a good question. And no, it doesn't affect your parents at all. It's kind of like as an undergraduate student, if you ever fill out the FAFSA with parent information, even if you only did it once, that's the only way it's used is it collects parent financial information to determine unmet financial need, but your parent is not co-signing on anything. They're not borrowing the loan. You as a student are the responsible payer of that loan. Unfortunately, though, it hasn't changed with the parent information requirement and now almost 30 years, but it's just used to determine unmet need, and that is it.
Okay, great. So is it possible to receive kind of all three of these loans in some form? Great.
You bet. Our non-resident students will stack them. Resident students, unless the tuition goes up a lot next year, and we hope it doesn't, don't have room for all of them, thankfully. Non-resident students, yes. I have a lot of non-resident students using all three. And you know, the PLUS loan will always have the highest interest. And so our non-resident students especially will use the health profession student loan to keep their PLUS loan borrowing down. and overall reduce their interest accrual from the PLUS loan with the health profession student loan. Of course, health profession student loan has the same benefit for our students from Iowa who are using the unsubsidized loan, but that interest rate will always be lower than the PLUS loan. So our non-resident students have the most benefit from it.
Great. Okay. So clarification here on, kind of when they repay, when they have to start repaying those loans. So if they end up, going from their DVM to maybe a master's or a PhD, so they
Yes.
continue that, when do these loans kind of go into effect?
Yeah, that's a great question. So if you continue as a degree seeking student, your loans are still deferred. Now, if you take a gap of a year or two and then go into another doctoral program or master's program, yes, those are going to enter repayment. But if you're degree seeking and you are registered at least half the time in that degree program, your loans are deferred, meaning no payment is required.
Great. And do they have to notify anybody about that, or does it just kind of automatically
Here
happen?
at Iowa State, no, you should not have to notify anybody. The Office of the Registrar certifies enrollment for all students registered, and then sends that certification to all loan servicers. This could vary by school though, and some schools may have a form that they have you as a student complete, but here you should not have to do anything else.
Great. Okay. Let's see. I'm just kind of quickly going through here the questions. So um so if you've already filled out FAFSA, does that automatically apply for unsubsidized plus and the HPSL if you include parent information?
Yes, it
Okay.
should. So it should consider, I mean, definitely unsubsidized and plus just because it's filed. That's all you have to do. And then for health professions, yeah, as long as it's filed with parent information. Now, once we get the list of admits after February 15th, we'll also be doing separate outreach to students who listed parent information on the FAFSA. You don't have to do another FAFSA or anything like that, but you will get an email from our office just about next steps. But filing the FAFSA with parent information is all you need to do to be considered for health professions.
Great. Okay. So I think that's it. Now, I guess if they need to change anything on their FAFSA, so I see this person kind of filed as if they were going to fill out, kind of on-campus housing, or maybe they filled it out, where they, would have a job and maybe they're not going to. How do they edit that FAFSA?
Great question. So you as a student can change nearly any question on the FAFSA. You can't change your marital status, but beyond that, you can change anything else. And some schools do really closely look at that housing question. We don't use it. Some schools use it to determine financially for living expenses. We know you have to pay to live somewhere. And so honestly, it doesn't matter what you put, you got to pay to live somewhere for the housing question anyways. And then if there has been a change in income and you're applying for the health profession student loan, just reach out to our office. We'll let you know if you need to do anything else for that. FAFSA usually does not allow you to change income for the current year since it's asking for information 2 years ago. But we as the school can help you answer those specific questions if there has been an income change and if there's anything you need to change. Sometimes the answer is no, you don't need to change anything at all. So maybe check with us before digging into those more in-depth questions.
Great. Fantastic. I don't want to bog us down too much. So I've got kind of I'm going to try and combo a couple of questions. What?
No, I don't have much more left, so go ahead.
Oh, okay. So one is kind of about, what else, the FAFSA takes into consideration. So things like, can their annual income, as a non-traditional student impact that? Can dependent children impact that, even though they're putting in also parent information?
Oh gosh, yes. Yeah, so what FAFSA is trying to collect is basic income information and investment information for the student and for the parent if parent information is listed. And then as well as the family size. The family size is a huge decision maker, oftentimes for undergraduate aides especially. If FAFSA sees, and this is an example for an undergraduate student, like if you have 5 people in your family and 2 are in college, FAFSA is going to say, hey, your family is going to be, tight money there if you're sending 2 to college. So yeah, listing dependents lets FAFSA know that you have higher financial need because whatever income you have is being split out between more people. Oftentimes, though, for students who are working on a professional degree or a master's degree, maybe a family size of 1 or 2, totally normal, as is a normal family size of a student who is married and has kids or has kids. So yes, make sure you list those dependents, list a spouse if you have a spouse, so your family size is counted. The higher that family size is, the higher need you're going to have. Now, we have a lot of questions too, given what happened in 2020 about income changes. Understandably, a lot of people were impacted by that. And yes, we do have a way where we can look at a change in income, but we may not need you to change anything at all for us. So just know FAFSA will always want your income information from 2 years prior, in this case, 2019. But if you're concerned about a change in income, contact the Office of Student Financial Aid. We can let you know if there's anything you need to change, or if you're good with just leaving things with where they're at.
Great, fantastic. So I think we'll pause on the questions for now, and then we'll revisit. I think there's probably going to be a rapid fire for you, Tara, in just a second. So.
Fine. So I think we've covered the heaviest financial aid stuff. This FAFSA loan stuff can be overwhelming and intimidating, especially if you're new to the process, or you haven't done it in a while, or you did it every year in undergrad and it's still kind of frazzling. I get it. But the last half of my presentation here will hopefully be a little bit lighter and help you maybe put the pieces together. So now that we've talked about financial aid, we also know you have a bill. And I do want to clarify a little bit about how your financial aid payment will work. So let's say you've got your financial aid offer and you've done the steps online to accept your loans. And so those loan steps you can do all online. You don't have to meet with anybody. And your financial aid disperses in August. Financial aid at Iowa State will disperse 1 week before classes start every semester. And if you're a student using financial aid to cover your rent or living expenses or personal expenses, anything like that, we'll first pay your bill at Iowa State, so your tuition and fees and your laptop, and then we'll refund all of that excess financial aid money back to you via direct deposit. Don't get too caught up in the details right now about what that looks like in terms of the electronic transaction, but just know we're going to electronically move your extra financial aid money to your bank account. And most students have that refund around the first day of class. So just know the financial aid steps, those slides I just covered, that's the most cumbersome part, is just making sure you know how to file the FAFSA. Getting your financial aid offer will probably be a breath of fresh air, a breath of relief, just knowing, okay, at least I have something here. And then everything else be completed online. Now, if you are a student who does not accept enough financial aid to cover your balance, or you still have financial aid on hold, you'll need to take care of those holds to have financial aid dispersed. And you can always pay out of pocket too. Just because you have financial aid options in terms of loans doesn't mean you have to use them. And you have until finals week every semester to decide what you want to borrow. So some students will wait and use their refund in money closer to the end of the semester when they know if they actually need it or not. That's a personal decision. And you'll hear at the student panel, most likely, students are navigating their budget in a variety of ways. Some students get a financial aid refund up front, other students don't get a refund at all, and other students will wait until the end of the semester to collect that refund. So just know once the pieces are put together, it will apply to your bill at Iowa State. If you are getting a refund, that will be generated and sent back to you. Some strategies I have that I've learned from students, kind of best case practices to reduce your loan indebtedness, because that is, I know, can be so stressful thinking about going into vet school, is to kind of create a budget of what your out-of-pocket expenses are coming into vet school. And you know, I'm not a rigid budget follower in terms of having every line on an Excel spreadsheet be a different specific budgeting item. I'm more of a believer that a budget is fluid. So we all know what the upper end of our budget kind of looks and feels like, and we know what the lower end of our budget looks and feels like just based on how we're feeling. If we're stressed, that means we're either underspending or overspending. So I want you to have an idea of a range of tolerance for your budget. What's the upper end of your out-of-pocket expenses every month, and what's the lower end of your out-of-pocket expenses? And make sure you have a way to cover those expenses either with financial aid or out of pocket. Students find very quickly that these out-of-pocket costs add up. So if you're responsible for your cell phone bill, media subscriptions, car insurance, car payments, those things that sometimes you're like, oh man, I can't believe I have to pay $65 for whatever this is. Does it fit in your budget, and how are you going to pay for it? Some students will find that they are able to use savings to cover these expenses. Other students may work a few hours a week. And by a few hours a week in school, I literally mean a few hours, like no more than usually 5 to 10 hours a week. A lot of students aren't working at all during the school year, but some might. And then there's a lot of options in Ames, since we are a college town, to shop on a budget. And so you'll find a lot of stores in Ames are kind of tailored to students in terms of their marketing, their coupons, their sales, stuff like that. Most students in the College of Veterinary Medicine, though, are using financial aid, so their loan money, to cover their direct education expenses or their billable expenses. So things like tuition and fees on their bill, because we know that's a fixed amount and it's a large amount to pay up front at the start of the semester. I also find a lot of students are using financial aid to cover rent. And this may be a new concept or new topic for you, but if you think about it, having financial stressors really can become stressful in other parts of your life too. And knowing that you have housing covered, if you're using financial aid to cover it, will help take hopefully some stress or burden off of you, knowing you can prioritize your schoolwork, that you have a way to pay for housing. And so I don't want you becoming overly stressed with your out-of-pocket expenses, because it will affect your performance in the classroom. The financial aid budget for housing and food specifically works out to be about $1,000 a month without accounting for any personal expenses we build into your cost of attendance. And just know within the town of Ames, you can live very comfortably and a housing preference of your choice for $1,000 a month. And so I know some of you are joining us from cities and you're like, oh my gosh, that would never work where I live. And others may be joining us from smaller towns or college towns and you're like, oh yeah, that'll definitely work. So just know about $1,000 a month is what you have to live on. And then within Ames, many apartments only require tenants, so students, to pay for rent and electricity. A lot of them are bundled packages. Others may separate things out into line items, but that bundling helps making your budgeting a little bit easier. And then that student panel next month will help to answer a lot of questions, because you may have heard that some students are purchasing their own homes in vet school. They can talk about those homes. And a lot of students are living in apartments too. And so talking with students either on that message board, chatting with Caitlin in the chat, or going to the panel next month can help to answer those kind of budgeting questions for students. But a way to keep your loan debt down, if you are stressing about that, is to minimize what you're using in your financial aid refund to live on, and to bring any money with you, or to reduce your debt prior to getting to veterinary school for consumer debt if you can. Knowing your student loans are deferred, but reducing consumer debt and kind of having an idea of what your budget is will hopefully put your mind at ease while you are here. And believe it or not, all students, whenever they graduate, never really feel all that great about their loan debt. I've not had a student graduating who is like, oh my gosh, today is so happy because I realized I have $210,000 in loan debt, or whatever it is. They're not all that thrilled about it. But I've yet to meet with a single student in 6 years who has any regrets. It was worth it. They're getting a career that they've wanted their entire lives, and they're going to be on a payment plan they can afford because they are a veterinarian. They will have repayment options available to pay their loan debt off. Students who are more stressed about loan repayment, and this can be if you borrowed $10,000 or $300,000, are students who knew they had to use loans to cover all their out-of-pocket expenses in school, and are realizing at the culmination of graduation what that payoff amount will look like. And so if there's anything you can do proactively before you get here to reduce your consumer debt or create a budget, use those steps. And then our current students are great resources too. They have mastered student budgeting better than I can ever teach you. And so they are great resources for questions. All right, frequently asked questions. The big one here, residency. This is the number one question. Not from non-resident students. Resident students, I know it's not your number one question. All right, so if you are not from Iowa and you want to inquire about residency, if you are military affiliated or just want to know, is there anything I can do now to establish residency? The Office of the Registrar, Iowa State, is the office to contact. The Office of the Registrar determines what tuition and fees you pay, the resident amount or the non-resident amount. If you are approved for in-state tuition and fees, the Office of the Registrar will let the financial aid office know where I work. But our office where I work in financial aid, we don't determine residency. We give you financial aid to help cover your tuition at your residency, but I don't determine it. So Office of the Registrar, you can email them or call them to have your questions answered. Grants and scholarships I've not talked about, and I did omit throughout this presentation for the most part. If you were a grant recipient in your undergraduate years, that's terrific. Grants are need-based money for students pursuing their first bachelor's degree, but they unfortunately are not available for a student who's pursuing any kind of a master's degree, doctoral degree, or professional degree. And then scholarships are merit-based. And so the admissions team will look at your application for admission to determine if you are eligible for any scholarships. Scholarships reduce your loan borrowing or reduce your out-of-pocket costs that you will have to incur. So it's definitely money. We all know that anyone wants. And then I do have some questions.
Oh, sorry, Tara.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, can I kind of interject just a few details about the scholarship? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Sweet. So scholarships for vet med, yes, definitely. There are some merit-based scholarships and some need-based scholarships, which is why filling out FAFSA is a really great thing. So our scholarship committee will look at your veterinary school application as well as FAFSA to award scholarships. Last year we gave out about $300,000 in scholarships to incoming students. And then kind of from the on top or including those $300,000 in scholarships and for incoming students, plus the students, you know, who get scholarships kind of all throughout vet school, we gave away $1.1 million in scholarships each year, and our dean is really committed to growing that. So it's fantastic to be able to kind of give out those scholarships. I know Tara, you mentioned at the beginning that once you're at Iowa State, we use a program called One App. So you'll only have to fill out one application to kind of be eligible for those scholarships once you're here. I know someone in the chat or in the Q&A box asked about other resources for scholarships. And I'll put in a website in the chat. It's the American Veterinary Medical Foundation. They list a lot of scholarships as well. So I'll post that website in the chat. But then I know our Office of Academic and Student Affairs is awesome about emailing out scholarships, you know, that are looking for recipients too. So there are definitely scholarships out there, probably not as frequent, I think, as there are for undergrads, but it's definitely still a good investment in your time. So.
Yeah, I do have a lot of current students who are finding scholarships outside of the College of Vet Med, and a lot of them are from organizations they're affiliated with. And so I would say most of them are not looking on FastWeb or CapEx, a website like that, to find scholarships. They're applying through organizations they've worked with or volunteered with. And then Caitlin as well, who's joining us to answer the Q&A questions, does have a scholarship from the Army. And so some of our military affiliated students are also helping to get their school paid for based on their service. And so there are a lot of scholarship options. I don't know, have there been any questions like for Caitlin or anything? I guess, Caitlin, I don't want to put you on the spot here, but anything you would add about your scholarship or what you've heard from other students in the program with you about applying for scholarships?
I guess I could probably talk about the Army scholarship in general.
Yeah.
And that might help
great.
kind of catch up with some of the questions.
Yeah.
And maybe answer some things that maybe people hadn't thought about.
Yeah.
Okay, so for the Army scholarship, the most common one, it's a 3-year scholarship, but I also believe there's a 2-year. But they've kind of moved everything to the 3-year. That seems to be the most popular and the most common for people. I applied the summer before my first year of vet school, but you can also apply during your first year. They do recommend applying in the summer just because there's a lot of paperwork and you have to go to, I had to go down to Des Moines to the Army base there to do a physical. And those things can get to be challenging to do while you're trying to get through vet school and you're like freaking out in your first semester. So I highly recommend getting those types of things done in the summer. If you can. If you can't, you'll figure it out. It's not that big of a deal. You can do it. The scholarship, they'll pay for your last 3 years of school. So you will need to do financial aid or find a way to pay for your first year of school, just to have that in the back of your mind. You also do get a monthly stipend for living expenses during those 3 years. And then also in the summer, they up that to pay the officer's salary. So you get a little bit more during the summers when you're at training. And then it goes back down during the school year just to their regular stipend, which I think that number kind of jumps around just a little bit depending on the year that you get in. So you can ask your recruiter about that amount. During the school year, they pretty much leave you alone. They want you to focus on your grades so that you don't have to like redo a year or get kicked out or something. So they really want you to focus on that and not have to worry about the Army stuff. So that's been really nice too. So I don't have to focus on like 2 things at once. During the summer between your first and second year, you attend one training that's about 4 weeks long. And then during your second summer, you attend a second training that's about 6 weeks long. And they pay for how you get down there. So that's not something that you have to worry about. During the 4th year, I'm still kind of learning about what that entails, but they want you to do basically an externship at an Army facility for, I think, at least 21 days. Depending on if Iowa State or whatever school you attend allows that. And if they don't, then you just get a letter from the dean that says no. And they work with you on that. So that's not something that you need to have at the front of your mind right now, just giving you a heads up. After you graduate, you complete 1 to 2 more training cycles, and then you're placed into a year-long internship, which is nice. So they don't just kick you out the door and say, see you later. After the internship, you owe 3 more years of active duty. And then after those 3 years, you can choose to remain active duty or go individual ready reserve for the next 4 years. Depends on if you like the Army and want to stay, or if you're like, I kind of want to just start doing my own civilian practice. You can do that through the individual ready reserves. And with that, they pretty much leave you alone unless they're like, hey, we need like a lot more vets. You need to come back. That's not a very common thing from what I understand. So that it's kind of just like, you're sort of an Army in the back of your mind, but you're really a civilian vet and you're ready to go into the civilian world after those 4 years. So in total, you owe 8 years after school, but you will have much less debt and you'll have a ton of great opportunities to the Army. So that you can travel and do all these other really cool things to the Army. So I'm super excited about that. During the first 4 years, once you're out, the deployment chances are very low, but they're never zero. So I'm not going to say you won't be deployed, but you probably won't be. That's not a super common thing. They don't want to send somebody brand new into something like that. But I know that it has happened in the past. In years 5 to 8, you'll have a higher chance. So those are usually a volunteer thing, but if nobody's volunteering, they might volunteer you to go do it. So it just kind of depends. So, I mean, you always should have that in the back of your mind. That is part of being in the Army. But I wouldn't have a huge major concern about that, because from the people I talked about in the Army, the deployment times that they had were some of the best things that they've done. They've really enjoyed it. There's a lot of different opportunities in the Army. You can be a clinician on a base. You can be working in food inspection. You can work with the canine soldiers, the equine soldiers, mascots. So the Army is the only branch that has veterinarians. So you can be helping the Air Force and the Navy as well. Sometimes with the Air Force, they have the Falcon mascot. So you might be working with them. I know the Navy has dolphins, so that is a possibility. You can also get a master's or specialize in some things through the Army. So that's also super great opportunity that I'm looking forward to. I think that's it that I have off the top of my head. So hopefully that maybe answers some more of the questions, and I'll be in the Q&A box to answer whatever else there is.
Yeah, thank you so much, Caitlin. And what you spoke to is an experience unlike any other, especially in the civilian world. And obviously it sounds very desirable. Can you speak to if it's competitive or if anyone who applies can get a scholarship like you have?
Yes, it's a very competitive scholarship. I think what they told me when I was applying is they give 30 of these in the entire US. And there's a lot of different vet schools. So it's very, very competitive. But I think it's worthwhile to be competing for it,
Mhm.
just because of all the benefits that they have. And it's kind of intimidating when you're looking at it, down the road. You're like, oh my gosh, but you only need to focus on today, kind of thing, because life can get very overwhelming. But yeah, it's competitive, but I think it's worth it. And just get some really good reference letters in there, and that'll help you quite a bit, I think.
Yeah, yeah. So we're very thankful to have Caitlin with us. Not only is she a terrific student in the college, but she is also one of the few students in the country who has the scholarship. So it speaks to her accolades. And Caitlin, as far as I know, the scholarship you have is available to students who want to participate or who want to practice any type of medicines, like small animal, mixed animal, or is it limited to small?
No, it's not limited. My interest is mixed practice.
Mhm.
And honestly, coming into vet school, I was more large animal, just because that's kind of my background growing up on a farm. But as I said, in the Army, there's so many opportunities. If you want to do small animal, that'll be super helpful if you're working with like the canine soldiers. If you want to do mixed, which I kind of recommend, because there are, equine and other things in the Army. Plus, if you whatever you want to do when you're done with the Army, if you choose to go another route, you have kind of that background as well with mixed. But yeah, it's not limited, I guess I would say.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And then, Caitlin, is there anything else you would share from your student experience specific to paying for school, or anything you can think of whenever you were getting ready to get your offer of admission?
Yeah. To be honest, I was terrified about financials because it is a lot of money and it makes you sweat. But just kind of, I attended a financial webinar like this, and that kind of straightened things out for me and questions I had. But I did the HPSL loan, and I did the whole, like, I'm an independent, but I've got to fill out my parents' financials.
Yes.
So we've all been frustrated with that. It's just one like red tape thing you've got to get through, and it's fine. But I would definitely look into scholarship opportunities, because you really don't know if you're going to get them or not. Like,
Mhm.
I kind of threw a Hail Mary last year and ended up getting a scholarship to help pay for my first year. So that was, I mean, it was surprising. I didn't think I would get any, but there was. So look into all the different options you have. Definitely apply, get your FAFSA done, apply for those scholarships.
Mhm.
And then also think of ways that you can save money during school. So, live like a student. You don't need to be, eating out at fancy restaurants all the time and like having all these luxuries. I would save up as much as you can, just so that on the back end of school, you're not regretting the gigantic bill that is going to
Yeah.
be staring at you.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and Caitlin spoke to it perfectly. Her experience is similar to how other students navigate the financial aid process. And so where you're at right now is where you're at, and we'll meet you where you're at. I don't expect you to be the expert. Caitlin now is an expert from her lived experience. She may not say that, but she is, in terms of how she's paying for school, and everyone has a different path. And so just know with everyone on the webinar today, you will all have a different financial path to your degree. And that pretty well wraps up the content I had to share today. I just have a last reminder screen that kind of sums up what we've talked about. So making sure you file the FAFSA, making sure you apply for those outside scholarships like Caitlin and Deanna spoke to. And then I'll be your primary point of contact for loan questions, FAFSA questions, or just any other getting ready to move to ISU questions. I've been around and working here for 10 years, and I completed one of my degrees here, so I'm familiar with the student experience on that side of it as well. But at this point, I'll open it back up probably to Deanna and Caitlin or Kathy or whoever else has any other questions for the group.
Yeah, so I do know we're at an hour, so I want to make sure that we're respectful for to folks' time. So I understand if you do have to log off and go about your evening, we're still recording, and I'll keep this kind of Q&A portion on there as well. But Tara, if you have a few minutes, we'll kind of do some rapid fire through some questions here. I am going to post your financialaid.iastate.edu link in the chat so that they can find more information there too. But so And I think your last question kind of that last slide with the FAQ kind of
Yeah.
answered this, but I know Iowa State provides student health insurance, and that is included for
Yeah.
vet students as well.
Yeah.
Do you know what the cost is of that? It does sound like student loans takes care of that as well, right?
Yeah. So financially can cover health insurance on your U-bill, and there's different plan options. There's the basic medical, and then there's also dental and vision that are optional. And the cost is uneven between the semesters. It also varies on if you're covering anybody else. But for this year, for the first semester, the health insurance cost was around $780 that appeared on the U-bill. And then for spring semester, it's usually lower. For the spring semester, I believe it was around $500. It's usually between $1,200 and $1,400 a year for full medical coverage. It's determined on an annual basis, but you already have health insurance. You're not required to purchase Iowa State's. If you want to purchase Iowa State's, you definitely can. And yes, financial aid can help to cover that for you on your bill.
Fantastic. Thank you. And just a bit of housekeeping. I think Kathy, you're the one who said that you can answer that one live. So if you want to hit done, that'll clear it from our queue too. So then the next question is there an annual income amount that would prohibit a student from getting that financial aid?
No. I would say, yes, there probably is an upper limit at some point, but there's so many things FAFSA takes into consideration that income is not the end all be all. I've had students come to me and say, I didn't have any financial need as an undergraduate student. I know my parents make too much money, and then they get the health profession student loan. So honestly, we don't know until we can see what's on paper. Worst case scenario is you don't qualify for health profession student loan. Best case scenario is you do. And if you provide parent information the first year and you don't qualify, you don't have to list it again. And I wish it were as easy as saying, yes, this income is the cutoff, but it's not that easy at all. So if you're curious, I would say list parent information if you are able and parents are willing. And if you don't get it, don't list it again in future years.
Great. So this student says, so will the fact that I'm considered a dependent and filling out filling out the FAFSA, will that impact?
The health profession student loan?
So it looks like any student loan is offered.
No. Yeah, no, it won't affect anything or taxes or anything like that. FAFSA simply looks at unmet need. And if you're dependent, that means that you list a parent information. So no, the only thing it's used for is health profession student loan.
Great. Okay, perfect. So next question is about a residency program. So, residency programs have a very low income.
They sure do. Bottom of the barrel.
Yes, but there's still an income. So how does that affect repayment?
Oh goodness, that's a great question. So in the last semester, whenever I'm meeting with students who are graduating, we do talk with about like internship options, residency options, because boy, they do not pay well at all. And so those students are usually not paying on their loans during that time. A lot of residencies may actually qualify for continued loan deferment, meaning you don't have to pay. Some students may choose to use an income-driven repayment plan, which reduces their payments down to no more than 10% of their take-home pay. But what we usually find at that point is take-home pay is so low that payment is not even required. And so I can't speak for all students who are doing a residency. The students I've met with, though, and have graduated, their plan was not to pay their loans during their residency because they simply couldn't afford to make payments and sustain a quality of life. After residency, the hope is that you have a specialization area where you can go into your career and then earn the income needed to make payments on your loans. So don't worry about the residency piece. I don't know what it'll look like in 5 years, but if it's anything like now, students are not usually paying on their loans during that time.
Great, fantastic, thank you. So a couple of kind of FAFSA housekeeping, kind of questions here. First, is if they fill out the FAFSA, they can fill out the FAFSA without that offer, correct?
Oh yeah, you can file the FAFSA without having a financial aid offer. You can fill it out after too, but yeah, go ahead and get it done. And you can list up to 10 schools on it. So if you applied to other schools, list them as well.
Perfect. And so then the next question is with the FAFSA, is there what is the FAFSA code? Do you know for the college
yes.
admin?
Yes, it is 00. I'm going to type it in.
Yep, I'm typing.
1869. So 001869. And it will pull up Iowa State University of Science and Technology, and that is where it goes. So it goes to the main Iowa State University, and then we'll get it linked up with your account.
Okay, great. And I know Kathy had mentioned to me when she was talking, sometimes it'll say like, oh, this is not a student, or, you know, you're not a student.
Yes, yep, those emails have gone out. So disregard, it just means that your application for admission right now is kind of in a pending status as admissions decisions are made. And it won't link up with your FAFSA until we can see your offered admission. And so I know a lot of those emails have gone out. Just accept it as acknowledgement that, hey, we have your FAFSA. One hurdle is done. Linking it up with your admissions account will come later. So yeah, I wish the wording were better in those emails because it can be confusing and very stressful to get that. But you're okay. We know you're in vet med. On our back end, we can see it. The email just doesn't relay that well.
Great. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Let's see. What is the average financial aid awarded to an out-of-state student?
So I don't know the scholarship amount. Loans will cover it all. But yeah, in terms of the average health profession student loan amount for students who qualified this past year for a non-resident student was around $4,600. Again, upper end of that was 9,000, lower end was 1,000, so right in the middle. I don't know what the scholarship is though.
Great. Okay, perfect. Thank you. And I'm wondering, or there's a student here wondering, will this available or this PowerPoint be available for them to kind of access later?
Yeah, I guess, yeah, Deanna, is there a place where we can post it?
Yes.
I'm fine with it being available later. I just don't know where to do that.
Perfect. So what I'll do, I think that there is a spot on, yes, there's a spot on the financial aid kind of page. And I'm sorry, my internet is being unstable, so hopefully you can still hear me. But there's a spot on.
No, you're good. I can hear you.
Okay. Page. So what I'll do is I'll update that with the PowerPoint you sent me, and then I'll send it out in a follow-up email to the folks on this call, but I'll probably just send it out kind of to all of our applicants too. So perfect.
Awesome.
Okay. So let's see, just kind of going through some of these we've answered already, but I want to make sure that we are getting all of them. So you determine this question says, does the college determine how much the FAFSA awards the student?
Yeah, so and financially, we determine the health profession student loan amount simply based on what your unmet need is. That's the only determination we make. Otherwise, if you file, you can be considered for the unsubsidized loan plus loan. And then the College of Veterinary Medicine makes those scholarship determinations. And so while it's separate from FAFSA, those will be made by the college itself.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Yeah, sorry. No, I was going to say it's different from undergrad because I think that there's a lot of confusion with that, where sometimes the financial aid office does have a lot of say in what type of financial aid you get for a bachelor's degree, because there's different types of aid options. There's really only loan options for a vet degree. So just know if you file the FAFSA, you're in for loans.
Okay. Go ahead. Great, thank you. So a question here about private loans. So if they for our international folks joining us, are private loans kind of their sole kind of way to fund vet school?
Good question. Yeah, so for loan options for international students, yes, limited to private loans, and then they will require usually a citizen cosigner on that loan, so someone who is a citizen of the United States. We have had some international students secure private loans in the past, and so yes, it's been done. There's also payment plans through Iowa State as well. That's not a loan. That's just paying the bill out of pocket. But yep, private loans could be an option for domestic students as well. You don't want to use a plus loan or go with your FAFSA.
Are there some students that you find need more than what is authorized by Iowa State that are taking out private loans?
Yes, I would say there's sometimes a need for that. The times I would say a student may request more than what we can certify is if they may be a non-traditional student and have other family expenses or have consumer expenses that just exceed what financially can cover. So your cost of attendance is approved by the Board of Regents as your allocated education expenses. We cannot exceed that unless you are, the instances we can consider our health insurance on the UBO, childcare expenses if you're paying childcare expenses, and then also commuting expenses for students driving into Ames. But otherwise, we cannot increase the financial aid and private loans as well. They have to, since they're education loans, they have to fit in that cost of attendance. But most students are, it may be tight budget-wise, but are living within that cost of attendance.
Great, fantastic, thank you. So I think it looks like a lot of these we've answered. So I don't want to rehash anything necessarily. So if there's something that you see too that we need to, but I think we want to, like I said, I want to be respectful of Tara's time and Kathy's and Caitlin's as well. So, kind of, if you have a question that's pretty specific and I didn't get it answered, please feel free to reach out to Tara at the email address on the screen. Look for an email closer to the end of the week from me that has her email address once again, the link to the PowerPoint presentation and the recorded webinar as well. So Tara, I want to thank you for your time this afternoon.
Yes, of course. Yeah. And if your question wasn't answered, like Deanna said, send me an email. I'm happy to talk with you via email or call. We can, and sometimes it's just easier that way too, to have your specific questions answered. So my door is always open virtually for questions.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. I know we did have one other question that's kind of housekeeping related, which is, for those folks who are sending in their transcripts, you'll notice a delay in when that says received, just because our Kathy's office is, first of all, a person down who's recovering from an illness. And so they're working through those transcripts that keep on rolling in. So please know that it will be, if you've sent it in, it will be processed soon. If you have questions about that, please put it on your message board. But yes, the received button will be, or that received status will, there'll be a little bit of a lag time in that. So Kathy's information, or Kathy's team, sorry, is working really, really, really hard on that. So perfect. Well, Caitlin, I want to thank you for kind of being put on the spot there and taking some time and chatting through some scholarship information with us.
You're welcome. Happy to be here. And I want to say, if anyone has questions, feel free to reach out. And that goes probably for any student at Iowa State CDM. I know we're all like super psyched to talk to incoming students. So it's really fun for us.
Perfect. Thank you, Caitlin. So if you want to get connected with Caitlin, I'm happy to have you email me and I can get you, I can get you reconnected with Caitlin too. And Kathy, thank you for being here in the chat. I really appreciate all of your work, your hard work with these applicants. So with that, we will end our webinar. Thank you again to my panelists. Thank you for everyone who joined us today. Have a great evening.